Hi friends, how are you? The most important thing in communication is hearing. The right questions at the right time to the right person leads to right answers. Questioning is an art. Today we will learn about interviews, which is a favorite with everybody. We all love to read, hear and watch interviews of our favorite personalities. Interview is providing more information. In today's class, we will understand what is interview, how to research before conducting an interview and ultimately how to set up an interview. Let us focus and learn more about what constitutes interviewing. What is an interview? An interview is defined as information, opinion or experience shared by a source in conversation with a reporter. The interview is eliciting of information and the course of the interview is determined by the reporter. American reporter Kristen Gilger says, skillful interviewing is the basis for all reporting and writing. As acclaimed journalist Tim Sebastian has stated that 3/4 of an interviewing is only listening. For preparing news stories and features, it is important to interview different people. Interviewing people has developed into a fine art. As such, interviewers should know the different types of interviews and also the techniques of successful interviewing. Interviewing is central part of any researcher's work. Information is available everywhere in this era of digitization, but talking to someone helps the journalist elicit more varied information and leads to new discoveries. Interview comprises of patience, confidence and an ability to listen, participate, observe and absorb. Let us see now what are the things you should keep in mind before interviewing. First and foremost, you should consider why you are doing the interview. You should know what kind of information you want or the kind of opinion required. Information is the merchandise of a journalist. While some of the information is gathered from records and some from observation, most of it is gathered in person-to-person conversations. Every journalist needs to develop interviewing skills. The personality should be such that the interviewer is able to meet people with confidence. The rapport and the friendly ambience creates the relationship. The relationship survives on the foundation of non-aggressiveness and mutual respect. Secondly, an interview is a formal event and the interviewee may be nervous or apprehensive if it is related to things which are controversial. A chat show is an informal interview event, but not the interviews conducted by the reporter for the respective media houses. The news interview is intended to give readers expert comments and illumination on a subject current in the news from persons directly or indirectly connected with the news item. In case of an accident, the news reporter tries to meet as many eyewitnesses as possible to prepare his story. The news story about the announcement of a new car factory gives the details as to who will put up the factory, how much it will cost, where exactly the new plant will be set up, how many persons will be employed, when the factory will go into production, etc. All these are simple facts. People assume that interviewing is easy, but it is actually not. Interviewing is an art. In reality, the aim of an interview is to provide in the interviewee's own words, facts, reasons or opinions on a particular topic, so that the listener can form a conclusion as to the validity of what they are saying. The opinions of the interviewer are not to be counted here and they should not get drawn into answering the question themselves. The opinion of the interviewee should come out in the open rather than the interviewer. Now we will come to types of interviews. There are several types of interviews and each type calls for a special technique. There is the interview with the man in the street, the so-called common man, though there is little common among common men, which is called vox pop. There is the casual interview, the personality interview, the news interview and the telephonic interview. Some of these types are intended for a news story, others for the making of feature story. For every kind of interview, elaborate preparation is necessary. Even the casual interview needs some pre-knowledge of the kind of information sought. Casual interview. The casual interview can take place almost by accident. A news source and a reporter happens to meet on the street or at a luncheon or cocktail party. Something that is said often without premeditation or design arouses the curiosity of the reporter. The personality interview. The personality interview is usually obtained for preparing a feature story and ordinarily does not figure in a news story. There is not enough space in a daily newspaper for such an in-depth interview, though there is always an exception to the rule. The personality concerned may be a celebrity or a non-entity who is doing something out of the ordinary, like raising a snake farm or growing Alfonso mangoes or a PhD shining shoes outside the local cinema house. The celebrity, either a politician, a prime minister, a film star or a Nobel Prize winner, is a known entity. The news interview. The news is usually given on a one-to-one basis, with the reporter interviewing his victim with the sole purpose of getting news. The reporter may have only one subject in mind, but he or she would have been prepared with a set of questions on that subject on which he or she is seeking information. The telephonic interview. One of the most important ways of collecting information is by means of the telephone. The telephone is an asset. It can save time, but it has its limitations. A pause of a few seconds in a face-to-face interview is of little consequence, but in a telephonic interview, a little hesitation while the reporter is busy formulating the next question may result in the busy man at the other end of the line hanging up on the interviewer. There are some other kinds of interview as per several sources which can help you understand the nuances of interviewing better. Hard news interview. The hard news interview is normally short, to the point and to illustrate a bulletin or a news item. It deals only with important facts or comments and reactions to those facts. The hard news interview, as a matter of fact, aims at getting answers to 5 W's and 1 H. In case a building is set on fire, the reporter will conduct interviews of those figures who can give him exact or almost exact information about the incident. Following questions may be asked: when did it happen? What about the direct affected? What is the amount of damage? Where are the injured ones taken to? Informational interview. The informational interview is similar to hard news interview, but not necessarily be restricted to main stories. An informational interview can be about an event, something that is happening or about to happen. It can also provide background. Informational interview goes beyond the main point to seek an explanation of the hows and whys of the story. They intend to get bit more detailed than short bulletin items. Investigative interview. The investigative interview aims at getting behind the facts to discover what really caused the happening of the events and sometimes what could be done to prevent a repeat of that incident. To get behind the facts, to dig out the actual reasons of the accident, train collision, air crash, the reasons of the reconciliation between two arch rivals. Adversarial interview. A kind of interview in which the interviewer gets into a war of words with the interviewee to get the question answered. This approach should never be seen to be a head-on clash between the interviewer and the interviewee. Though the interviewer is representing the audience or speaking up on behalf of the public opinion, even then he need not be impolite or rude while asking questions. Interpretative interview. There are two types of interpretative interviews. A reaction story, it is a response either for or against what has happened. Second is the explanatory story. This story provides details of a news story. So, the interview that is conducted to get the details of an event, accident or incident is called interpretative interview. For instance, if a train is derailed causing severe injuries and damage to the passengers, any representative of the railways may be asked, how will this accident affect public confidence in train travelling? What measures will the ministry take to restore the public trust? These are some of the questions we can ask to the victims. Vox pop. Vox pop is an abbreviation of the Latin expression vox populi, that means voice of the people. It is conducted to obtain diversified public opinion on certain issue. The questions are asked from different people representing different age groups, races, classes, etc. What is research in interviewing? A lot of preparation has to be done before setting in to conduct the interview. One should be clear whether this interview is simply for the purpose of seeking information or as a part of investigation. How you prepare for the interview depends on the kind of story to be covered. It may be a news story, personality profile or an investigative piece. The reporter must prepare by reading about the background of the issue, about the personality to be interviewed, whether in the internet or through articles and books. Never go without preparation. If you are preparing for a news story, pay more attention to clips about the subject of the story than the personality to be interviewed. To prepare for a profile, the interviewer should focus on personality quirks and the subject's interests, family, friends, habits and professional accomplishments. To prepare for an investigative piece, the interviewer should know both the interviewee and the subject matter. One must also ensure whether the interviewee has been interviewed on the same subject before. The purpose of the journalist is to elicit new information. The journalist should also listen to the previous interviews of the interviewee if available. If possible, one should also talk to colleagues who have interviewed the interviewee previously. One should not overlook the possibilities of gathering information from other reporters or editors about the person or the subject. The interview should be interesting and easy to understand. If the interviewee perhaps uses technical words or difficult language, one may need to explain them by using simple words. Sometimes people are nervous while talking to a journalist. In that case, make a list of the questions you want to ask them and just brief the interviewee about it. The interviewee may also not wish to reveal the identity, so be very careful about it and respect their privacy like victims of sexual crimes or for legal reasons. If anonymity is promised, it should be delivered effectively. You must also research and be careful if the person you want to interview is going to be a witness in a court case. It may cause some serious disruption in the court case and interfere with the judicial process. The reporter should also research whether the interviewee is qualified enough to speak on the subject. If the interviewee you wish to speak is a child, then you have to be very careful. Children can be more open to suggestion than adult. So, the question should be framed sensitively. Journalists should also seek the consent of the parents of the child before interviewing. Children are vulnerable when emotional, so the reporter must take extra efforts to make the ambience very comfortable. At times, organizing the interview can be very difficult, specifically if the interviewee is scared or refuses to divulge any details. The reporter has to deal tactfully and make sure that the desired response is elicited. Every interview has a strong public interest motive behind it. So remember that your investigation is to expose the issue which people need to know. Before clicking pictures, also you should be aware to take the consent. While formulating the questions, keep certain basic questions ready after formulating the problem. Few important questions should be ready. As the course of the interview continues, the questions will be asked automatically. Do not restrict yourself to those limited questions you have jotted down. What are the principles you should keep in mind while interviewing? Number 1. Prepare carefully. Familiarizing yourself with as much background as possible. Number 2. Establish a relationship with the source conducive to obtaining information. Number 3. Ask questions that are relevant to the source and that induce the source to talk. Number 4. Listen and watch attentively. Now we come to how to conduct the interview. See, setting up an interview is not always easy. People may be apprehensive in talking to a journalist, especially if the story is controversial. While dealing with public officials, start from the premise that the public has the right to know everything. Experienced reporters have found that they can persuade even the most reluctant officials to agree to an interview by several means. The reporters should be particular in creating a relaxed and informal atmosphere. Interview is basically conducted to study background details or to use the information somewhere else. The reporter should be able to devise questions which will draw revealing answers. Therefore, the reporter must be aware of the entire situation within which he is operating. The reporter must be clear of what he wants to know and the problem should be carefully formulated in his mind. The reporter should work hard in refining the skills to be able to conduct the interview. The interviewer should ask questions, digest responses, record answers, cajole the source, gauge reactions and look for details. The reporter can offer to meet at the most convenient time and place for the person they want to speak with. Limiting the amount of time restricted may also help. Treating people with respect and telling them precisely why you want to talk to them will help sources be less anxious. Reporters need to be clear as to why the story requires detailed interview. If difficult to contact through middlemen, that is secretary, then it is advisable to directly leave a message or mail during business hours in an effort to get through the person to be interviewed. Once the research is done regarding the person and the topic, comes few handy tips for preparation. Number 1. Develop a list of questions or topics. This list should be with you, but do not read out of it. This is just a reference so that you do not forget something. The list includes other information like documents, photographs which is deemed necessary to obtain from the source. Number 2. Questions are the backbone of the interview. Remember that. The questions are the rudder which keeps the ship going in the right direction. Good questions can reward you with unexpected answers with rich information. On the other hand, questions that are too specific can lead you in the wrong trail. Make your questions brief and put them one at a time. Always get the full meaning of the statement made as well. Produce hard fact as well as opinions. The reporter should never imagine that he knows it all. Number 3. Reporters must be able to ask a question and then listen to the entire response all the time, concentrating on the key points. Number 4. The reporter must judge when the interviewee is at ease and ready to answer the questions. Number 5. Questions must be asked clearly and any ambiguity would be disastrous. Therefore, the subject must be encouraged to talk. Number 6. Make your questions brief and put them one at a time. Number 7. Icebreaker question. The first question in an interview is important as it sets the tone for what is to follow. Several journalists like to begin with the icebreaker question, which lets the source relax. The question helps establish your credentials with the source and can bring in a sense of trust and openness. Number 8. Remember, even a no comment is conveying some kind of information to your audience. Number 9. Open-ended questions. Most of the time, the best questions are open-ended questions, which cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. These questions are also non-judgmental as it does not establish the reporter's point of view. While it is important to shoot good questions, it is also important to be quiet and let the interviewee talk. Good journalists are good listeners and learn the most significant information by being silent. Number 10. Closed-ended questions. For certain subjects, the reporter needs to close in on a point of view to pin down details to get the respondent to be specific. Closed-ended questions are designed to elicit specific responses, but the reporter should know exactly when to ask a closed-ended question or when to be less specific. The type of information you are seeking and the chemistry between the interviewer and the interviewee are the determining factors. The interviewer must take spot decisions. Number 11. The interviewer should also postpone any suggestions of taking notes till the rapport is established with the interviewee. The most productive interview is a result of good understanding between the interviewer and the interviewee. Number 12. Medium. Reporters can do interviews in person, by telephone or through email. Mostly when it is face to face, the reporter can record the entire interview in a recorder. But meeting a person gives the reporter the ability to judge the credibility of the source. The body language plays an important role in speaking a lot about the person. Petty details and the comfort factor cannot be denied while interview is conducted face to face. Tape recorders may eliminate the burden of unnecessary writing and is more accurate by nature. However, it should be used with full consent and knowledge of the interviewee. But with its advantages also comes the disadvantage of the reporter to play lengthy tapes and find out the important segments of the conversation. Number 13. Environment. Most interviews are conducted in the interviewee's office, but it is a good idea to get the interviewee in its natural territory. A person has more power in his or her official surroundings. It is important to let the source know how much time we require for the scheduled interview. Number 14. Make sure you let the interviewee know that you may contact back again in case you need some added information. Television interviews take less time and some reporters find it easy to take down notes as it is not necessary to maintain any eye contact. On the other hand, email interviews are important while reaching out to people far away. But one should be careful so as to not end up with fake email address. Sometimes there is difficulty in reaching the subject and then personal interviews cannot be conducted. In that case, a telephonic interview is the last resort. By using telephone, the reporters can achieve a great deal by saving time and gaining information. The practical way of avoiding preliminaries or lengthy explanation is to conduct telephonic conversations with the interviewee. Reporters using emails or other online forms of communication should follow the same professional standards which they would do so in any other form. The journalist must introduce herself or himself and tell what information they are exactly seeking for and why. The journalist should be polite and courteous in their questioning. Always thank the interviewee for their time and contribution as you will need them again. In case the person you want to interview is very busy, try to reschedule. Be persistent, but remember, the person may not choose to speak to you. Most interviews are conducted on the record, which means the reporter can use anything that is said and attribute it directly to the person who is speaking. If any information is off the record, the reporter must agree in advance to the conditions under which the information can be used. An interview on background or not for attribution generally means the information can be used in a story and the source's words can be quoted directly. Another ground rule for journalists is to understand the use of an embargo on the kind of information provided by a source. This means that the information is provided on the condition that it is not to be used until a specific time. A government agency announcing a new policy may provide a written summary several hours in advance or even a day ahead. Reporters who accept information under an embargo are bound to honor it unless the news becomes public before the specified time. Once the interview is conducted, once again check with your sources, check the facts and concepts. Many dull interviews become interesting after they end. So, if you have an iota of doubt, kindly ask the interviewee and do not shy away. The interviewer should also verify the notes, facts, dates, quotes, spellings and titles. Remember, accuracy is the key to a good interview and a major deterrent in all the interviews. Hence, maintain accuracy and honesty as much as possible. Okay students, so far we learned what is an interview, the types, how to research and conduct an interview. The biggest communication problem is that we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. And as an interviewee, we cannot afford to do so. Hence, in the next module, we will discuss about the do's and don'ts of interview.